and difficult, but to release a women empowerment song produced by a woman's abuser is insane. I really hate fake feminism. We also had actress Abigail Breslin not mentioning Katy, but writing that working with known abusers in any industry just contributes to the narrative that men can do abhorrent shit and get away with it. Stream Kesha. Though that's also not the only reason that people have been taking issue with this song. Or you've got tons of people who aren't fans of the music video teaser that Katy shared, since it shows her in a revealing Rosie, the Riveter-inspired outfit at one point, dousing herself in whiskey, joined by a bunch of female dancers, all dressed as scantily clad construction workers. And so you had folks writing things like Woman's World, and all you can see in the teaser is a woman's body sexualized as much as possible. Making a quote-unquote feminist song when all you're doing is being hypersexual in the music video, plus sexualizing feminist icons is crazy. With many arguing that all of this, it just caters to the male gaze. Others also taking issue with the dancers, noting that on top of them being sexualized, they only represented a very thin beauty standard, and claiming things like it's a woman's world and she only shows women with one body type. You know, with a lot of this, people saying it just appears like she's behind the times and out of touch with where culture is at large. And one of the conversations around this is, rather than promoting these ultra-thin ideals, you actually now have a lot of mainstream pop stars who are singing about those standards and how it harmed them. With, for example, the New York Times even doing a piece on the trend this week, noting that Billie Eilish's new album has lyrics like, "People say I look happy just because I got skinny, but the old me is still me and maybe the real me, and I think she's pretty." You also had the likes of Lorde hopping on a Charlie XCX song to include a verse saying, "For the last couple years, I've been at war in my body. I tried to starve myself thinner and then I gained all the weight back." Right? And they're not alone. Taylor Swift has also sung about this. Olivia Rodrigo having lines like, "I started to skip lunch, stopped eating cake on birthdays." And so with all this, you have the Times saying, it is indicative of a subtle shift among the current generation of female pop stars who have recently been acknowledging, often in stark, striking, and possibly triggering language, the pressure they have felt to look thin. Though obviously, with all this discourse happening, there are people that are more focused on one thing or the other, whether it be the Dr. Luke stuff, the hypersexualization, or, the body images. But ultimately, we're gonna have to wait to see if this actually negatively impacts the streams, if it negatively impacts the sales, or, if all of this discourse, it just brings more and more attention and success to something that she's releasing. Because, that's just how the attention economy works. Though personally, as someone that was previously a very lost and angry young man, the only thing I care about in the music world this week is Eminem dropping an album tomorrow. The rest is just static and noise to me. But then let's shift gears to very interesting news in the world of podcasting. And a lot of it's being driven by Amazon's Wondery going after some of the biggest names in the industry, with them now reportedly inking an $80 million deal with Dax Shepard and his Armchair Expert show. And that's a big deal not only because of the number, not only because it was formerly with Spotify, but now Wondery is going to distribute that podcast and co-produce 2 new ones. And that's in addition to holding an annual live stream with Dax and also launching video episodes and taking on the whole back catalog. And this, as Wondery is also apparently in talks to pick up Travis and Jason Kelsey's New Heights podcast. Though that is not set in stone yet, neither is the future of Call Her Daddy, which according to the Wall Street Journal, while it is with Spotify now, it's being shopped around, and the Wall Street Journal saying that Sirius is currently a front runner to pick it up, but also possibly a game changer, also maybe it's a nothing. It looks like Spotify is interested in getting engagement on podcasts, with them now reportedly set to launch a comments feature on its podcast. Though apparently it would not look like the comment section that you're used to, because according to The Verge, comments will be default as private, and creators then get to approve what comments that appear there. And then they can also just opt out of the feature in full or on a per episode basis. Though I will say, I don't know how many podcasts are going to enable the comment section. And that's because there's been conversation in the industry for a very long time that a lot of podcasts actually have very inflated or boosted numbers. And while in places like YouTube, you can go to a video and see if the number of likes and the number of comments, it seems, kind of real, where you can have viewers and advertisers who know this space looking at it, and they can tell you if it passes the smell test or not. There's a belief that a number of podcasts that are successful just on podcasting platforms would not. But regardless, big shifts, big changes. It's very interesting. And then, while Biden old definitely got the gold this week for media attention, silver, I would say, goes to Project 2025. Clarence Thomas, he's been fighting to make the podium, right? And that for a number of reasons, starting with 2 Democratic senators are calling for a criminal investigation into Thomas for possible violations of tax laws and federal ethics, right? With Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island and Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon sending a letter to Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, asking him to appoint a special counsel that would be tasked with investigating Thomas's failure to disclose his sugar baby antics, with that including the acceptance of lavish gifts and luxury travel. And specifically with this, they're asking the special counsel to look into whether Thomas violated tax laws by failing to disclose his income, the $267,000 he received in forgiven debt for a luxury RV, with the Senate Finance Committee previously concluding that a good chunk of that loan came from Thomas's friend, Anthony Welch, assaulters and was forgiven in 2008. They're also asking the special counsel to investigate the $25,000 in consulting fees paid to Thomas's wife, Virginia, by conservative judicial activist Leonard Leo, with some ethics experts saying that those payments raise questions about whether Thomas should have recused himself from certain cases. And in their joint statement, White House and Wyden wrote, "We do not make this request lightly. Supreme Court justices are properly expected to obey laws designed to prevent conflicts of interest and the appearance of impropriety and to comply with the federal tax code." And adding, no government official should be above the law. Now with this, the senators may have asked for a special counsel, but that doesn't mean that the Justice Department is actually going to make that happen. With, for example, Jeremy Fogel, a former federal judge and executive director of the Berkeley Judicial Institute, saying, inevitably, it would be seen as political retribution for rulings the justices made that they don't like. I just don't know how you get out of that box. Though also, actions that may lead nowhere, that seems to be kind of the theme surrounding everything Clarence Thomas. Because also in the news, you have Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez introducing articles of impeachment against Thomas and Samuel Alito yesterday, with AOC accusing both justices of failing to recuse themselves from certain cases that have come before the Supreme Court, as well as failing to disclose gifts from wealthy benefactors. And AOC saying in a statement, Justice Thomas and Alito's repeated failure over decades to disclose that they received millions of dollars in gifts from individuals with business before the court is explicitly against the law. And the refusal to recuse from the specific matters and cases before the court in which their benefactors and spouses are implicated represents nothing less than a constitutional crisis. And further adding, Congress has a legal, moral, and democratic obligation to impeach. Though really, with the current state of things, especially with a Republican-controlled House, this is not going to go anywhere. Though it gives me the opportunity to drop a little piece of fun trivia. The only time that a Supreme Court justice has actually ever been impeached was Samuel Chase back in 1805, but even there he was acquitted by the Senate. Also, if that ends up helping you on a trivia night, you owe me a drink. But that said, going back to AOC, she was joined by several Democrats in introducing the articles of impeachment. And as the New York Times said, some Democrats say their party must make a case against the justices in the court of public opinion, which I will say there, it could have value, especially as we head to an election where the Democrats are going to really need to focus on policy versus what Trump would do if he gets back in office. Whether that be something like a Project 2025, or the fact that he'd be in a position to put more people on the Supreme Court, along with the fact that the people he has put on the Supreme Court already have made massive sweeping changes, whether it be immunity or Roe v. Wade, what more of that could look like in the near future, especially if he gets to put even more people up there. And then I want to take a second to talk about today's sponsor and something that's been a game changer for me. Seed's DSO1 Daily Synbiotic. We're all hearing a ton about gut health these days, with just millions of posts and endless videos throughout social media. Like, it just gets overwhelming, right? But amidst the confusion, there's one company standing strong for scientific integrity and transparency, and that is Seed. What sets Seed apart is their commitment to science. These guys, they're not messing around. It's not just a probiotic, it's a synbiotic, a blend of prebiotics and probiotics that supports a healthy gut microbiome and overall health. And look, I'm not a doctor, but I care about what I'm putting in my body. And Seed's DSO1 has been a vital part of my daily routine for years now. So if you're ready to cut through the noise and truly nurture your gut health, give DSO1 a shot, especially because Seed's giving you beautiful bastards 25% off your first month. You'll receive this 30-day supply, refillable glass jar, a travel vial, and then after that, they send sustainably packaged refills. You just gotta go to seed.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco25 at checkout to get 25% off your first order of Seed's DSO1 Daily Synbiotic Plus free shipping. And then, so if you want a sneak peek at all the chaos we're gonna see this November, you don't have to look further than Washoe County, Nevada, which if you're unfamiliar is a swing county and a swing state, as well as the second largest in Nevada. And it is gonna be a decisive factor in choosing the next US president. Last month, we saw Washoe voters going to the polls for several local elections, including a Republican primary for the Washoe County Commission and a nonpartisan primary for a school board seat. And right off the bat, there were some administrative issues, most notably a printing error that meant that some people in a small precinct may have needed to re-vote. And so the losing candidates in each race, Mark Lawson for the commission seat and Paul White for the school board seat, both Republicans, requested a recount. And turns out the man funding not only their election campaigns, but also the recount itself is a wealthy Republican donor by the name of Robert Beadles, who notably, ever since the 2020 election, has been working very hard to replace local officials with far-right election-denying conspiracy theorists. And he has shown himself not to be above mobilizing an army of activists to harass election workers until they buckle. Or back in 2022, for example, he hounded the registrar of voters so hard, accusing her of treason and demanding she be fired or thrown in jail, that she just quit. And just to give you an idea of what's inside this guy's head, he claims to have an analysis from a mathematician and an artificial intelligence supercomputer showing that it was highly unlikely that his candidates lost their elections. So as you might imagine, he and his people went absolutely buck wild when the voter registrar's office took longer than expected to recount ballots because the tabulation machines broke down. And this, even though the interim voter registrar said there were no errors or discrepancies in the recount, which by the way, changed only a single vote in each of the two races, so the initial results were essentially fine. But when the county commission gathered to certify the recount on Tuesday, dozens of people, including Beadles, protested outside the building.
We want a hand recount now.
But a key thing is that Nevada law requires recounts to be performed by the same method that the original election was tallied. So in this case, it was machine tabulation, right? Meaning that everything seemed to have been done properly and the results were clear, and so the drama was presumably over. But then, in a shock to the whole county, 3 Republicans on the 5-member commission, they voted to not certify the recount, with that including Michael Clark and Gene Herman, who really, they weren't a surprise since they both voted against certifying votes in the past. But this also included Clara Andriola, the swing vote on the commission, who voted with Democrats to certify the initial count.